The narratives have just erased us from all of the civic activity of this country. And the idea was, let's do some research to be able to say, here's some data that shows what Native voters care about.
This is Hourglass, the podcast for United Way of King County in Seattle. Coming up, a conversation about civic engagement with NAWDIM, the Native American Women's Dialog on Infant Mortality. NAWDIM is a Seattle-based United Way-supported collective of Indigenous care providers, community members, grandmothers, and allies who provide advocacy, education, and support for Indigenous infants, mothers, and families in Washington state. NAWDIM is currently working with the Seattle-based Native Organizers Alliance on a national research project that amplifies the concerns of Indigenous people before, during, and after elections. We'll chat with NAWDIM co-coordinators Shelley Means and Leah about their efforts to ensure that state and local Indigenous voices are heard, particularly on the eve of this year's August Primaries and November's general elections. We'll also discuss an event celebrating the return of the annual Summer Meals Program, and we'll talk about our Community Partnership Kit offerings. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for tuning in. How important is the 2026 election cycle? Consider this. Elections will be held for all 10 Washington seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Elections will also be held for nearly half the seats in the Washington State Senate, all 98 seats in the Washington House of Representatives, and more than half of the seats in the Washington Supreme Court. In King County, 6 county-level offices are scheduled for re-election in 2026, including 4 of the 9 King County Council seats and King County Elections Director. In many local jurisdictions, elections for mayors, city councils, municipal judges, and school boards will be held. That means many communities in our county will reap the attention of candidates from now until Election Day. Their communities have enough voting age residents to make a difference in the outcome of elections. That means candidates will put up posters in their communities, stop by stores or places of worship in their neighborhoods, perhaps even go door to door. Others in our county and state don't garner as much attention. They include Indigenous residents, who comprise approximately 3% of Washington state's population and about 2% of King County's population. Their communities often believe that they are overlooked during election cycles. And like everyone else, some Indigenous communities' issues align well with that of the general population, but many of their concerns are very specific to their communities. Fortunately, there are Indigenous organizations that are founded, staffed, and run by people from their communities who know firsthand of those concerns and are working to ensure communities' voices are heard during election cycles. They include NAWDIM, the Native American Women's Dialog on Infant Mortality. NAWDIM is a Seattle-based United Way-supported collective of Indigenous care providers, community members, grandmothers, and allies who provide advocacy, education, and support for Indigenous infants, mothers, and families in Washington state. NAWDIM is working to bring Indigenous voices to the table in partnership with the Native Organizers Alliance, a Seattle-based national organization that provides Indigenous people with support and resources to enhance political power. The two organizations are aligning with others to conduct the Indigenous Future Survey, a national research project to amplify concerns of Indigenous people before, during, and after elections. The survey probes which issues are at the forefront of Indigenous communities, as well as the levels of trust those communities have in elected officials. 3 such surveys have been conducted since 2020, and among their findings are that the top priorities among Indigenous people are environmental protection, tribal sovereignty, and the economy. They found that 60% of respondents say that candidates' positions on priority issues influence how they vote, and less than half of respondents felt confident in the federal executive branch of government. NAWDIM says the surveys are currently being conducted in our area, and results and findings will likely be reported later this summer. NAWDIM is a member of United Way of King County's Indigenous Communities Fund. Since the fund was launched in 2020, we've granted about $5 million to local groups to address the many needs of King County's Indigenous communities. Hourglass sat down with NAWDIM co-coordinators Shelley Means and Leah about their efforts to ensure that state and local Indigenous voices are heard, particularly on the eve of this year's August primaries and November's general elections. We begin with Shelley, who spoke about the survey and its importance.
It's meant to encourage civic engagement. Mm-hmm. And so we're asking questions about things like, do they vote? Do they vote at the tribal election level? Do they vote local, state, federal? And what are the things that would motivate them to vote or continue voting? The Native Organizers Alliance is a national group. They first came together to help train organizers in our community nationally to advocate for the Native-focused part of the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. It was the Indian Health Care Act, and then it was rolled into the Affordable Care Act. And in their trainings, they also started doing campaigns, getting more involved with turning out voters and but doing it in an Indigenous way, not necessarily just like signing on with other national campaigns, because we have different ways of organizing that are more culturally attuned. And so the first maybe 3 or 4 versions of this survey were more, I guess, academic. They were really geared to change the narrative that there aren't enough Indians that matter, in the voting world, or there are these narratives that have just erased us from all of the civic activity of this country. And the idea was, let's do some research to be able to say, here's some data that shows what Native voters care about. Okay. Here's the priorities we share. Here's the things that matter to us. It was called the Indigenous Futures Survey the first couple of years, and they did community-level grassroots organizing, reported out with state-level data, and it was all really important and really good information. But what is important in sort of our circular way of thinking and being is we needed to make sure we could get information back into communities in ways that would motivate them to participate and to start running for offices and to start voting for candidates that actually see our community and our community needs and solutions. So this version of it sort of, I would say, goes back full circle to the super grassroots way of organizing. And so they're doing, I think, maybe 9 or 10 different states. We're the only one out of the group. NAWDIM is the only one that is taking on sort of a state-level survey. Oh, okay. And we've got 3 outreach people, one in Spokane, 2 here in Seattle, and one is focusing on talking with birth workers, with the doulas and the midwives and the lactation focused and moms and families, and as is the one in Spokane. And then, Leah and I are also conducting some here and there just to get a good sampling of voices. And so it's everything from what the Western world would call the leaders of our organizations and that, all the way to, the new parents on the block who are being served by our community organizations. Mm-hmm. It's a short survey, and it's personal. I mean, it's very definitely conducted in a way that is not just here, I'm going to give you a QR code, go fill it out. Mm-hmm. It's more relational. I think that's the difference between most surveys and this one, is that it's conversational. It's let you hear your thoughts on this. And then we'll check some boxes for you about, where you identify, what your demographics are and what your whatever. But that part of it is not the most important. It's the, let's relate your world to how civic engagement can improve your life.
Okay.
And so, it's using that concept of trusted messengers.
Mhm.
Lee, what am I leaving out? I guess I haven't really gone into questions that we're asking.
That's the next question that I had for you. You read my mind. If you could give maybe one or two questions or one or two themes for questions.
Sure. I pulled the survey up as we were talking. And one of the questions, and it goes from 1 to 5, with 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. And so one of the questions we ask is I feel connection to traditional teachings, which is a protective factor. Another question is I feel connection to community. So we're really hoping to hear about people's experience if they're feeling isolated or if they have community around them. Another question is I want to be more connected to traditional teachings. One of the things that NAWDIM provides for our community is we do cradle board making classes. And so a connection to traditional teachings, again, is a protective factor.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the last question for this section is I want to be more connected to community.
And so when do you plan to send these out?
We're underway. We've
wow.
already started. The project Native Organizers Alliance asked us to set a goal of 100, but I think we're already, far on pace to have way more than 100. Not way more, but more than 100. And the people we are surveying are people we already know at some level.
Okay.
And maybe people they know, they might refer because they might want to participate. And the community events are a big place where we will just, see people and sit down with them and walk through. Some of these might be at a clinic, tribal clinic, where we know you can sit with a cup of coffee and just visit with somebody. Mm-hmm. And sorry, there were 2 more questions on the survey that I want to mention because I think I'm really excited to kind of see what kinds of responses we get. Mm-hmm. One is the very end of it, before we kind of rattle through some of the demographic stuff, we ask, what is your vision for your community? Mm-hmm. And I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that on a survey, so I'm excited to see how people reply to it. Mm-hmm. And then we also ask them to, out of a list of maybe 6 or 7 large topics like the environment and jobs or the economy, we ask people to select the 3 that they think are the most important or urgent right now and why. All of those things relate to health,
Right.
And so we're excited to kind of see how people respond.
And my last question to you, from a civic engagement standpoint, is this going to registered and non-registered voters?
Yes, absolutely. And we're hoping that if we run across non-registered voters, that we can talk with them about where they can connect to in Washington State, to look at registering. And, that question about what would motivate you to vote in the next election, I think will get us that kind of feedback.
Great. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Shelley of NAWDIM. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for chatting with us today on Hourglass.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
For more information about NAWDIM, the Native American Women's Dialogue on Infant Mortality, log on to NAWDIM.org. For more information about the Native Organizers Alliance, log on to nativeorganizing.org. And to learn more about United Way of Kane County's Indigenous Communities Fund, log on to uwkc.org, click on What We Do, click on Equity Fund, and click on Indigenous Fund. To celebrate the return of the annual Summer Meals Program, families and individuals are invited to the free Summer Meals Celebration on Friday, July 17th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Highland Park Playground, located at 1100 Southwest Cloverdale Street in Seattle. The event will include free food, a bouncy house, and other kid-friendly activities. There will be free summer meal sites in King County open through the end of August. For more information, log on to freesummermeals.org. If you're a company interested in volunteering and team building, consider United Way's Community Care Kit opportunities. Community Care Kit offerings are packages loaded with essential items for King County residents based on needs identified by neighborhood-based organizations. Assembling and distributing those kits is part of a volunteer project known as Kit Builds, and we've hosted kit builds for companies and organizations in our area for more than a year. Among the organizations that have taken part in kit builds are Amazon, the Gates Foundation, PACCAR, and Microsoft. And ArenaNet and Finvari have kit builds slated for July. For information on how you can sponsor a community care kit offering opportunity, log on to uwkc.org, click on Get Involved, click on Volunteer, and under Group Volunteering, click on Learn More. At United Way of King County, we are working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. Hourglass United Way is a podcast that highlights how we and our partners spend time making a difference in our communities. Our work is made possible by generous donations from people like you. Please send all comments and suggestions about our podcast to hourglass@uwkc.org. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn via @UnitedWayKC. And to learn more about our work or to support United Way, log on to uwkc.org. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for listening. Until next time.